The morning my world cracked open began like any other. The kind of quiet dawn where you believe you're doing something good, something selfless. I was 31, a woman who had worked herself to the bone for years, carefully stacking pennies into something meaningful. For 2 years, I'd been cutting corners, skipping dinners out, saying no to new clothes, working late into the night at my marketing job, just to squirrel away enough for one grand gesture. A trip to Europe. Not for me alone, but for my parents, my way of finally giving them a slice of beauty after their decades of sacrifice. It was supposed to be my thank you, my love letter in the form of plane tickets and hotel keys. But when I pulled into their driveway that morning, my heart pounding with anticipation, suitcase in the trunk, the first fracture appeared. My mother came out first, her face bright with an almost theatrical smile, tugging her suitcase behind her. I thought she was simply excited. But then I saw my sister Lauren, hair bouncing, dragging her own suitcase, as if the scene belonged to her. For a moment, my brain couldn't process it the way a body resists understanding pain until it's undeniable. "What's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, though my pulse raced in my ears. My mother didn't even flinch, didn't pause before delivering the sentence that would cleave our family in two. "Oh, Violet, we decided Lauren should come instead of you. She's been so stressed lately, she really needs this trip." Those words didn't just land in my chest, they detonated. I'd planned every moment of this journey, the luxury hotels, the guided tours, the little dinner reservations tucked into cobblestoned corners of Paris. I'd sacrificed years of my own joy. And yet, with a wave of her hand, my mother dismissed me as if my effort, my presence, my very existence was trivial. My father shuffled behind her, avoiding my eyes, carrying his suitcase, like a man burdened not by guilt but by habit. "And Lauren," she smirked, leaning on one hip, her voice dipped in faux gratitude as she said, "Thanks for understanding, sis." I felt my throat tighten, a scream pressing against the back of my teeth, but all I did was swallow it, lock it away behind a brittle smile, and force my hands to move as if they were someone else's, opening the trunk, loading their bags, pretending my heart wasn't splintering. The drive to the airport was torture, each mile stretching longer than the last. Lauren's chatter filled the car, buzzing about Paris, shopping TikToks she wanted to recreate, oblivious to the storm tightening inside me. My mother encouraged her, laughed softly as if I wasn't in the driver's seat, as if I was nothing more than their chauffeur. My father muttered a weak thank you, his voice trembling, but even that only twisted the knife deeper. I wasn't included in their we anymore. I had been erased from my own gift. By the time I unloaded their luggage at the airport, my patience was a thread frayed to breaking. My mother hugged me quickly, thanking me for understanding, while Lauren pranced ahead, suitcase wheels clicking like applause. I stood there on the curb as they disappeared into the terminal, my chest hollowed out, anger vibrating through my bones. The ride home was a blur, every word replaying in my mind like poisoned echoes. "This means a lot to Lauren. You're always working so hard. You can take another trip later." I parked in my driveway, fingers aching from gripping the steering wheel, and before I knew it, I was storming inside, opening my laptop with a clarity that was almost frightening. One by one, I canceled everything: the hotels, the tours, the upgrades. Refund confirmations stacked in my inbox like soldiers lining up for battle. By the time I closed the screen, a strange calm had washed over me. They wanted to take Lauren instead of me. Fine. But they would not enjoy my gift without me. The calls started as soon as their flight landed. My phone buzzed and rattled across the counter as my mother's name flashed again and again. Their messages poured in like a flood, frantic and angry. "Violet, the hotel won't let us check in. Call me immediately. This isn't funny, fix this now. Your father is furious. Your sister is in tears." For the first time in my life, I laughed. Not out of joy, but out of something raw and wild, the sound of years of quiet suffering breaking free. Fix this. That's what I'd always been. The fixer. The one who smoothed the edges, picked up the slack, erased everyone else's mistakes. But not this time. When Lauren's voicemail came through, her voice shrill with entitlement, demanding I stop being petty and fix it now, I deleted it without listening to the end. A part of me that had been dormant for years was awake now, and it wasn't interested in playing servant anymore. Eventually, I answered one of my mother's calls. Her fury roared through the speaker. "What did you do?" "The hotel says the reservation was cancelled. None of the tours are booked anymore." I let her rant, sipping the silence until it was thick, then calmly replied, "I cancelled them." The silence that followed was more satisfying than any applause could have been. "Why would you do that?" she finally hissed as if she couldn't fathom the reason. "Oh, I don't know," I said, my tone sharp with the sarcasm of years unsaid. "Maybe because you decided to take Lauren on my trip. You're lucky I even drove you to the airport." Her voice rose, snapping, accusing me of being dramatic selfish. But I was done listening. I hung up, turned off my phone, tossed it onto the couch, and for the first time in decades, I sat in the silence and felt it not as loneliness, but as freedom. The silence didn't last long. By the next morning, my phone was vibrating across the table again, lighting up with missed calls and angry texts. For hours, I ignored it, immersing myself in the simple rituals I'd neglected: cleaning the kitchen, folding laundry, making tea. But curiosity tugged at me, and by evening, I finally opened the flood of messages. The words leapt from the screen like tiny daggers. "You've gone too far. Your sister is devastated. We can't get into any of the hotels. You're acting like a child." And finally from my dad, "We need to talk. This isn't right." I set the phone down, a bitter laugh catching in my throat. Not right. What wasn't right was being erased from the very trip I had sacrificed years to give them. What wasn't right was being replaced once again by my sister, while my efforts were brushed aside like dust on a shelf. For years I had swallowed the unfairness, convinced myself that if I kept giving one day, it would be enough. But here was the proof it never would be. The next call I answered, my mother didn't waste a breath. "This isn't funny anymore, Violet. We're stranded. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" Her voice was sharp, dripping with the humiliation she thought should move me. But instead of guilt, I felt a strange sense of strength rising in me. "Embarrassing," I repeated, my voice low. "Try saving for years, planning every detail of a dream, only to be told you're not even part of it." She snapped back that Lauren needed the trip more than me, that I was being selfish. And I heard myself say words I never thought I'd dare, then let her figure it out. "You made your choice. Now live with it." In the background, I could hear Lauren's whiny complaint. "Mom, just hang up on her. She's impossible." That was the final straw. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. My voice turned icy as I said, "Enjoy your trip." "Oh, wait, you can't." "Because it wasn't your trip. It was mine. And now it's nobody's." I ended the call, turned the phone off, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty. The days that followed were eerily quiet. No buzzing phone, no endless demands. I sipped coffee on the porch, listened to the birds, felt the rhythm of my own breathing. The peace was intoxicating, and it terrified me how little I missed their voices. For so long, I had been defined by them, the responsible one, the fixer, the afterthought. Without their constant pull, I began to see the outlines of myself again. By the third day, curiosity gnawed at me enough to switch the phone back on. The screen exploded with notifications, 12 voicemails, dozens of texts. I scrolled through each one, a crescendo of panic. My mother's voice grew shriller with each message. "This has gone too far. We're humiliated. How could you treat us this way? We're your parents." Lauren's messages were venomous, calling me petty, selfish, cruel. And then my dad's voice, softer but no less pointed, "Violet, I don't understand what's happened to you. Call us back so we can sort this out." I deleted most of them without hesitation. But the last voicemail made me pause. My mother again, her tone tired, now deflated. "We're back at the airport. The trip is ruined. Your sister is devastated. Your father and I are disappointed. Doesn't even begin to cover it. Call us when you're ready to talk." Her words should have pierced me, should have triggered the old reflex of guilt. But instead, I felt something else: clarity. This wasn't about one trip. This was years of being overlooked, dismissed, sacrificed for the sake of my sister's comfort. The trip was only the final straw, the spark that ignited a fire that had been waiting too long to burn. That evening, my friend Grace showed up at my door with 2 cups of coffee and an arched eyebrow. "I heard about what happened," she said, setting the mugs down. "Your mom called me yesterday." Of course she had. My mother had always been skilled at recruiting allies when she needed to pile guilt onto me. "And what did you say?" I asked, bracing myself. Grace smiled slyly. "I told her you were probably busy and would get back to her when you were ready." The laugh that burst out of me was half relief, half disbelief. "You're the best." "No, you are," Grace said, her voice suddenly serious. "Because you finally stood up for yourself. I know how hard that is, Violet. Don't let them drag you back down." Her words lingered long after she left, settling deep into me like seeds. She was right. I had spent too long bending, folding myself into shapes that pleased them only to be discarded again and again. This was my chance to break free, to rewrite the story. By the weekend, the simmering anger had cooled into something else: freedom. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't bound by their expectations. I wasn't scrambling to fix their chaos. I was simply living on my own terms, and it felt terrifyingly, beautifully new. It was Sunday afternoon when the silence finally broke in a way I couldn't ignore. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was my father's name on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was weary, heavy, like someone carrying more than just suitcases back from a ruined trip. "Violet," he began cautiously, "your mom wanted me to call. She thinks you'll listen to me." I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. "Go on," he sighed. "Look, this has all gotten out of hand. Your mom's upset, Lauren's furious. It's just a mess. But you're better than this." Those words snapped something in me. Better than what I thought. Better than finally standing up for myself. Better than refusing to be walked over. My voice rose before I could stop it. Better than what, Dad, standing up for myself. Refusing to let you all walk all over me again. "That's not what I meant," he said quickly, his tone suddenly defensive. "You've always been the reasonable one, the one who keeps everything together. This isn't like you." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "You're right, it's not like me. Because for once I'm not bending over backward to fix the mess you all created." He paused, and for a fleeting moment, I thought he might finally understand. But then came the same tired refrain. "You're punishing the whole family over one decision. Is that really fair?" The word hit me like a slap. Fair. How many times had I swallowed that word down, watching fairness bend and twist until it only ever favored Lauren? I nearly shouted into the phone. Fair. Was it fair when you and Mom decided I wasn't important enough to go on the trip I planned? Was it fair when you replaced me without hesitation, like I didn't matter? "That's not what we were trying to do," he said, his voice tight, almost panicked. "We just thought Lauren needed it more." Of course they did. They always thought Lauren needed more. More attention, more comfort, more support. And I was always the one expected to sacrifice. "Not anymore," I snapped. My voice was trembling, but it wasn't weakness, it was rage sharpened into resolve. The silence on the line stretched until it became suffocating. Finally he muttered, "I don't know what you want me to say." "I don't need you to say anything," I replied, my voice steady, almost cold. "I just need you to understand that I'm done. From now on, I come first. Goodbye, Dad." I ended the call and set the phone down with shaking hands. For the rest of the day, I let the emotions flood through me. Anger, grief, relief. It felt like shedding a skin that had clung to me for too long. I was no longer the family's fixer, and I wasn't going to be again. When my parents and Lauren finally returned from their disastrous trip, I was ready. I parked in their driveway, coffee in hand, sitting calmly on the porch swing when their taxi pulled up. They looked exhausted, dragging their scuffed suitcases with faces etched in irritation. Lauren spoke first, her voice sharp with venom. "Well, I hope you're happy, Violet." I raised an eyebrow, refusing to rise to her bait. "Happy about what?" "Our trip was a disaster," my mother snapped, her voice shrill. "We spent the week in dingy hotels eating terrible food. And don't get me started on the tours, there weren't any." Lauren crossed her arms, her pout practiced and theatrical. "Do you know how humiliating it was to be turned away from places because you canceled everything? Everyone was staring at us. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting their complaints wash over me like rain on a roof. Sounds rough, I said flatly. But you wanted to take Lauren instead of me. I'm sure you had some bonding time. That's not the point. My mother's voice rose, cracking under the strain. You knew we couldn't afford the things you planned. You set us up to fail. I stood then, setting my mug down gently. No, Mom, I didn't set you up for anything. I planned a trip for the three of us, something special I worked for years to give you. You're the ones who decided to cut me out at the last second. My father finally spoke, his tone low but firm. You didn't have to cancel everything, Violet. That was extreme. Was it? I folded my arms, holding his gaze. Why should I have paid for a trip I wasn't even invited to? If Lauren needed it so badly, you should have planned it yourselves. You're lucky I didn't cancel the return flight too. Lauren rolled her eyes. You're so dramatic. It's just money, Violet. My patience snapped. And you're so entitled, Lauren. Do you have any idea how much sacrifice went into planning that trip? Or do you just assume things magically appear because someone else, usually me, takes care of it? They stood stunned silent for once. I pressed on, my voice steady. For years I've been the responsible one, the fixer. And you've all taken it for granted. You chose her over me like always. So I chose myself. I'm not your doormat anymore. I grabbed my bag from the porch swing, my decision final. I'm glad you're back safely, but don't expect things to go back to the way they were. I'm done. Their voices rose behind me. Anger, guilt, desperation, but I didn't look back. Driving away from their house, I felt something I'd never felt before after a confrontation with my family. Not dread, not exhaustion, but peace. The next morning, sunlight spilled into my kitchen as I made tea, the warmth seeping into my hands through the ceramic mug. For once, I wasn't bracing myself for the next demand, the next phone call, the next guilt trip. The air felt lighter, almost foreign, and I realized that peace had been something I'd never really known until now. Grace called me later that day, her voice bubbling with curiosity. So, how did it go? She asked, skipping any pleasantries. I laughed, leaning against the counter. Exactly the way you'd imagine. They're furious, Lauren's sulking, and Mom, well, I'm sure she's already figuring out how to spin this, so she's the victim. Grace snorted. Let her try. You've finally got a backbone, and I'll make sure it stays in place. Her words wrapped around me like armor. For so long, I'd been starved of validation, conditioned to doubt myself, to yield. But here was someone telling me I wasn't crazy, that standing up for myself was strength, not betrayal. Over the next few weeks, I began rebuilding a life that felt like mine for the first time. Small changes, but each one was monumental in its own way. I redecorated my living room, replacing the hand-me-down furniture from my parents with pieces that reflected me, bright colors, soft textures, little touches of joy. I explored local cafes and parks I'd always meant to visit but never had time for, savoring the taste of freedom in every latte, every walk beneath sun-dappled trees. And I started writing again. Not for anyone else, not to earn praise or approval, but for me. My journal became my confessional, my witness. I poured into its pages every thought I'd been too afraid to speak, every dream I'd pushed aside for the sake of others. For the first time, my words weren't about pleasing anyone, they were about reclaiming myself. One evening, I sat at my desk staring at the spreadsheet I'd used to plan the Europe trip. Rows of canceled reservations blinked back at me. For a moment, I expected regret to wash over me, but it didn't. Instead, a surge of determination filled me. That money hadn't been wasted, it had been freed. I wasn't going to let it rot in the shadow of betrayal. I was going to use it for something else, me. That night, I booked my first solo trip. Italy. Not Paris, not London, not the carefully curated itinerary I designed for my parents. No, this one was mine. My choice, my adventure, my gift to myself. When I landed in Rome weeks later, the air thick with history and possibility, my chest swelled with something I hadn't felt in years: exhilaration. The cobblestone streets, the clamor of Vespas, the scent of fresh espresso, it was intoxicating. I wasn't anyone's chauffeur, anyone's fixer, anyone's afterthought. I was just Violet. And that was enough. I wandered through ruins older than memory, marveled at the Sistine Chapel, until my neck ached, indulged in gelato on the Spanish steps. There was no schedule, no compromise, no one else's whims dictating my days, just me and the quiet thrill of freedom. One afternoon in Florence, I sat along the Arno River with my journal. Instead of writing lists of things I needed to do for others, I wrote dreams for myself: learn a new language, start a small business, travel to at least 5 more countries. Each word felt like a declaration of independence, a vow that my life would no longer be built on sacrifice for people who couldn't even say thank you. On my last night, I ate dinner at a little family-run restaurant overlooking the river. The sunset painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, and as I sipped wine, a profound peace settled into me. This trip wasn't just a vacation, it was a turning point. A declaration that I didn't need anyone's permission to live, to dream, to be happy. For years, I'd chased my parents' approval, my sister's validation. And sitting there thousands of miles away from all of them, I realized the truth: I didn't need it. I was enough. When I returned home, souvenirs in my bag and lightness in my heart, the calls started again. This time their tones were softer, measured. My mother's text read, "Hope you had a nice trip. Maybe we can all talk soon." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. The old Violet would have answered immediately, would have rushed to smooth things over. But not anymore. This time, it would be on my terms. A week later, she finally called. Her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. "Hi, Violet. How was your trip?" "It was amazing," I said simply. "That's good to hear," she murmured. There was a long pause, as though the words she wanted to say were heavy. "We've been thinking about what happened. Maybe we handled things poorly." I laughed, but it wasn't cruel. Poorly. "You replaced me on a trip I planned and paid for without even asking. Poorly is an understatement." I know, she admitted, her voice breaking. "We didn't realize how much it would hurt you. We thought Lauren needed it more." I leaned against the counter, my heart pounding. "Mom, this wasn't just about the trip. It's about years of putting her first and expecting me to pick up the slack. I'm not doing it anymore." Her silence was heavy, but then she said, "We'll try to do better. We don't want to lose you." Her words tugged at me, but I'd learned enough not to mistake apologies for change. "It's going to take more than words, Mom. I need to see effort, real effort." "You will," she whispered. "We'll give you the space you need. But I hope you'll let us back in someday." After we hung up, I sat in the stillness, a swirl of emotions inside me. Relief that they were finally acknowledging their behavior, skepticism about whether they'd ever truly change, and above all, strength. Because whether they changed or not was no longer my responsibility. Over the following months, I kept my boundaries firm. I responded to messages when I wanted, not when I was pressured. I signed up for a photography class, joined a hiking group, and even began planning my next solo trip. Each step felt like reclaiming another piece of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. One evening, sitting on my porch as the sun dipped low, I realized something: I was free. Truly, deeply free. Not because my family had changed, but because I had. I was no longer the fixer, the afterthought, the sacrifice. I was someone who valued herself, who stood her ground, who wasn't afraid to walk away. And that, I knew, was the real gift I'd been searching for all along. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever given until there was nothing left and still been told it wasn't enough, know this: you are enough. You deserve to be valued, to be respected, to be loved without condition. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if you've ever felt echoes of your own life in mine, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe for more stories of resilience, heartbreak, and healing. And tell me in the comments, have you ever had to stand up to the people you loved most?